Welcome to Ideas of India, a podcast where we examine academic ideas that can propel India forward. My name is Shruti Rajagopalan, and today my guest is Chandra Bhan Prasad, who is a political commentator and activist, the editor of the Dalit Enterprise magazine, an entrepreneur, the founder of the BuyDalits.com platform, an advisor to the Dalit Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also a winner of the Emergent Ventures grant for his research on Dalit capitalism and progress. I had a chance to speak with Chandra Bhan about his latest book titled What is Ambedkarism? We also discussed the role of capitalism in Dalit progress, Dalit entrepreneurship, reservations, his platform BuyDalits.com, his intellectual journey, and much more. For a full transcript of this conversation, including helpful links of all the references mentioned, click the link in the show notes or visit discoursemagazine.com. Chandra Bhan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
In your latest book, What is Ambedkarism?, you talk about one particular work written by Ambedkar. This is the Dalit Emancipation Manifesto of 1951, which you call the most important work ever written by Ambedkar. And you also talk about how this has been missed by most Ambedkarites and scholars, and how this particular manifesto has not gotten its due or not been read enough. Can you talk a little bit about that?
In Ambedkar's life, he wrote only one paper, his manifesto, that is headlined Scheduled Caste Emancipation Draft Manifesto, where he says this is the scheme, this is how there will be a Dalit emancipation will take place. It says Scheduled Caste Emancipation Draft. To it is a communist manifesto, the way communist manifesto is important to communists, the way Hind Swaraj is important to Gandhians. This document has the same importance. But editors of Ambedkar volumes have published this all-important document in the 17th volume. Why should not have been this document printed in first volume, second volume, third volume, fourth volume, fifth volume, sixth volume? Why? I am asking editors of the Ambedkar volumes, because that is how our mind shapes. If you start with the riddles in Hinduism, then you start thinking Ambedkar in a different way, in that way. The other important event of Round Table Conference, where he emerged as a rock star, that is also discussed 17th volume. Greatest contribution of Dr. Ambedkar is his petition to the then Governor General, grievances of scheduled caste. That is where he thinks like a very pragmatic father or mother thinking of her children. So the children will go to school, but there is a long history of denial of Dalits, prohibition for Dalits to possess caste. So if that has been the history, if there have been great moments in the history of India where Dalits have demanded cash for wages, grains, so he says there should be free ship from school to university. And suppose the child has got admission, he has to buy pen, pencil, stationery and other things, pocket cards. Then he said scholarship from school to university. And then he goes on. And today, if I am here, you are talking to me, had there not been scholarship, had there not been free seat, and then had there not been reservation in education, I would have remained somewhere else. But his followers, Ambedkar's followers, do not give a damn to what he stood for. And this particular document has been published in, I believe, in 10th volume. If I was the editor or I was part of the editing team, I would say this is where Ambedkarism starts. Most of the things that Ambedkar did that matter today to Dalit middle class, that has a annual income of $50 billion. And if Dalits were a country, they would be 79th largest GDP in the world. The reasons behind this has been published in 10th volume, not in first volumes. I will say that Ambedkar's volumes have been very, very poorly edited.
When I read your book, that is when I opened Ambedkar's volume 17, part 1. I had never read that far either. So I picked up the Dalit Emancipation Manifesto. I had read bits of it before. I actually read it in its entirety. I recommend everyone does. It's only about 18 or 20 pages. And one really interesting thing that came out of it, you hinted before that it's a manifesto, right? Like Hind Swaraj or the Communist Manifesto. But what is really interesting about this manifesto is, at one point, Ambedkar says the policy of the party is not tied to any particular dogma or ideology such as communism or socialism or Gandhiism or any other ism. Later in the same manifesto, in point 30 of the policies he lays out, Ambedkar writes, and I quote, "In our foreign policy, we have not been able to make a distinction between capitalism and parliamentary democracy. The dislike of capitalism is understandable, but we take care that we do not weaken parliamentary democracy and help dictatorship grow." Unquote. Now, the interesting thing is that Ambedkar is critical of capitalism, and he is indeed sympathetic to many socialist policies throughout his career. And yet, as you point out, he doesn't single out capitalism in the first quote, where he says that our party does not espouse communism, socialism, or Gandhiism, right? He doesn't single out capitalism in that quote. And it's really remarkable because this is written at a time when communism and socialism are very much on the rise. It's very fashionable. John Maynard Keynes has already written his essay, The End of Laissez-faire, and, written the obituary for capitalism in one sense. Why do you think Ambedkar spares capitalism when he is writing this manifesto?
At the time he was writing his manifesto, 1951, the world was completely divided in two camps, two ideological camps, capitalism and socialism. A revolution has taken place in neighboring China. It was so fashionable in India to act like a communist. Jawaharlal Nehru is so fascinated by Marxism. At that point of time, anybody saying that I will write a book against communism and remain very indifferent to even use the 10 words Capitalism. So at that point of time, if somebody is not targeting in his manifesto, he did not target capitalism. He says just one line that I can understand that their criticism of capitalism. He says just that. And as you said, and I'm trying to sell this idea to the Dalit middle class, to my limited knowledge, Ambedkar is the only intellectual of his time to say that state sector is necessary, state will be allowed to. Wherever private sector is necessary, private sector will be allowed. This is not a mixed economy. He is trying to pitch a private sector and state to compete with each other and come out with their best. So somebody will say, Baba Sahib Ambedkar said in 1932 this, and Mr. Prasad, you are ignoring that. I will give importance to what he said in 1951 in a document that he says this is what will cause Dalit emancipation. As you may have read it, what is the relationship of lifting ban on liquors? How does it impact Dalits? There is only one paragraph or one chapter on scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and all welfare measures, higher education, etc. Rest, there is no, in the scheduled caste manifesto, there is hardly any use of the term scheduled caste, because he was envisioning an India where what is good for Dalits is good for India, what is good for India is good for Dalits. So, had editors of Ambedkar volume said in the very first volume that Ambedkar's India is Dalits of India, and the fortunes of India as a nation state and fortunes of Dalits are tied up. Then he would have not been known as a Dalit leader and Dalit thinker and Dalit scholar. There would have been enough reason to celebrate him as a national scholar. We did a survey for University of Pennsylvania in the year 2008, and we have figured out in 7% Dalits in 20,000 households have benefited from state government job. What happens to rest 93%? What happens to 20 to 30% Dalits who have made their houses on their own? Because they got opportunity to migrate to industrial cities. They got opportunities to migrate to industrial cities as workers. If you want to become a government servant, you have to have some education. And that education will not bring you government jobs. You have to compete for that. Indian civil service students start writing at the age of 22, and Dalits can go and write till the age of 37. They get 5 years relaxation. But you enter a city and you get a job next day. So why to blame capitalism when you see that your 3 sisters and your 4 cousins are liberated from landlord's yoke because they fled to Bombay and Delhi? And same with the African Americans during Great Migration after World War II from America South to Central America or Midwest America. So Dalit intellectuals should have started reading Ambedkar from this point of time. But I'm asking in the book, Kansiram launched his BSP in 84. By that time, Ambedkar's volumes had not reached a place like JNU. So when did he read Ambedkar's volumes? The Dalit Panthers was launched when the first issue of Ambedkar's volume came into being. So the Dalit politicians and Dalit intellectuals were trained not by Ambedkar's thought. They were trained by sayings that Ambedkar was anti-Brahminism, he was anti-Manu, he was anti-Manuwad, vagara, all etc. They were not trained by what Ambedkar's book says. And also, Dalits have this fascination for slogans. So Ambedkar's writings are of 2 kinds. One is his speeches, others are writings. His speeches are given by very ordinary people. The leader knows that he or she is speaking to maybe unlettered in the audience, high school dropouts, few highly educated. But when you write something, then you know that every word will be measured, and your critics and your future critics will measure what you are saying, what you are arguing. So more than his writings, his speeches have influenced the Dalit mind more. So I just want to say that you come out with all those things and read what Ambedkar writes for people who can, at that time, who could read English.
Absolutely. Ambedkar is remarkable in his pragmatism and also in how he thinks about the future. Because again, in the manifesto, it says the party will be ready to adopt any plan of social and economic betterment of the people, irrespective of its origin, and provided it is consistent with its principles.
Capitalism is not just one shade. It has a European capitalism. It has Sweden and Norway are capitalist countries, but their capitalism is not exactly what the kind of capitalism US has. So Cuba is a socialist country. So he wants to free the minds from dogmas. So he says whatever is good, irrespective of its origin, this manifesto will follow that. So Dalits have to see Ambedkar as a scholar who is marrying interests of India with the interests of Dalits and vice versa.
You have a very simple rule that if we manage to uplift the Dalits, that means we have managed to do what is good for all Indians, because the people who have been the most oppressed have been in some way, lifted out of that oppression and lifted out of that poverty.
I find Ambedkar's writings that were written during an ideological hegemony of socialism and communism. I just give one example that I have given emphasis in, that he emphasizes in his manifesto. He says, manifesto says, if elected to power, farming will be done on large farms. Right? Tell me which ideology says this? Two, he says, agriculture will be completely mechanized. Does socialism say this? Does communism say this? And the third point he's making, that there will be high manure. He's hinting towards chemical fertilizers. And he says some good quality seeds. I have heard from my childhood in my district, Azamgarh, that the slogan was land to the tiller. And if more machines come, this will hurt Dalits most. But why is Ambedkar saying that farming will be completely mechanized? Because Ambedkar needed somebody, some thinking scholar to say that, because any occupation done by bare hands has no respect in society. So a Dalit tilling land of a landlord using two bullocks and walking on his feet is a different laborer than a laborer who is tilling the land sitting on a tractor. So when Ambedkar is saying this is Dalit Emancipation Manifesto, and he's not naming the beneficiaries.
When I read that portion on the agricultural policy, he has 3 points there. And it's really remarkable. I just wrote a column today in Mint on the biggest problem plaguing the farmers today is low productivity because of fragmentation of land holdings. The average size of holdings across India is 1 hectare or so. And when after I'd written that column, I was reading this Ambedkar manifesto, and I was just so taken by how far-sighted Ambedkar was in a few things. One, he understands that in a really developed economy, there is going to be so much division of labor and specialization that there will be a lot of mechanization, and productivity in large farms will hopefully be so high because of economies of scale that, very few people will be required to do the job, and they will probably sit on tractors, as you mentioned. The second part is, of course, the dignity aspect, which you are talking about, which is, there is a difference in dignity in land being tilled by one's bare hands versus, using machines and doing it on a large scale. But I think there's a third part. His future imagination for Dalits is to exit the agrarian sector. Ambedkar reached great heights by leaving the traditional occupations behind, by going abroad to study, by studying law, by studying sociology, by studying economics, and then, becoming a scholar of a different level. Of course, he also practiced as a lawyer. In his imagination, people who have for centuries tilled land don't need to be tilling land anymore in the new India where you have, everyone has a right to vote and everyone has political equality. And he talks about that through agriculture. And I found that element particularly fascinating in the manifesto. He talks about foreign policy. He talks about agriculture. He talks about, the role of public sector enterprises and the role of the state. None of this, as you mentioned, has anything directly to do with Dalits, but all of it has to do with his imagination of how a future would look where Dalits are not trapped in traditional occupations.
Yes, and more importantly, his essay that came as a book, Problem of Small Holdings and Their Solutions. I read that small book as one of the greatest writing when he was a student at the Columbia University. Due to the two big droughts in India, 1888 and 1901, India had suffered huge loss of life and cattle because there was huge drought So the British government started a process that why India is not doesn't have a buffer stock. And then the economists come and discuss, and they say that because there is low yield in India. And the reasons they found is small holdings. That discussion was going on amongst economists when all Indians were pursuing their career or thinking of going to London for a law degree. Ambedkar as a student is saying, no, fragment, not only small holding, but fragmentation of land holdings. And one family remains tied to that small plot of land with the hope that something will come, and they keep on generation from generation. So he said, end this nonsense. And then he quotes American example. He says, they said that let us have a minimum 100-acre rule. He said, no, you can't do it by rule, by law. So overall, he's thinking of India as a modern nation, completely urbanized, completely industrialized. He's thinking of America, India as America, Europe, Sudan.
What is Dalit capitalism according to you? And what are some of the inherent contradictions between the Dalit movement and capitalism? Because on the one hand, it seems that capitalism increases inequality. But on the other hand, capitalism creates a lot of opportunity and lifts millions of people potentially from poverty. So how do you think Dalit capitalism plays out in India?
So here is my question. If you have a child who is now grown up, wants a job, the child is not much educated for some reason. There are two employers for your child. You have to pick up one. One is Raja Bhaiya of Pratapgarh, that landlord Gunda, and other is Ratan Tata. Tell me, whom would you pick up employer of your child? Should I say you would prefer Ratan Tata? So if Ratan Tata is good to your child, Ratan Tata should be good to all children of underclass. Second, suppose your wife is pregnant and she will deliver a baby very soon. Would you prefer Delhi government hospital or some corporate hospital? Tell me what is good for your child. Third, you have a choice of Delhi public school for a child who was born in a corporate hospital or government MCD school, municipal corporation school. Which school would you prefer for your child? Then everybody is silent. So, what is not true should not be pursued.
So where do you think this sort of demonization of capitalism comes from? Is it, as you pointed out, this wrong conflation that Ambedkarism is communism, Ambedkarism is socialism, Ambedkarism is anti-capitalism? So is it a misunderstanding of Ambedkarism, or is it something else? Is it coming from some other place in society or within Dalit culture that demonizes capitalism, at least in while they speak, but they embrace capitalism in their actions?
I have a scholar friend, D. Shyambabu, whom you know. We were touring Uttar Pradesh during 2014 elections. We interviewed two landlords. One is landlord in Sitapur district, near Lucknow. The other is in Azamgarh district. Both the ex-landlords have some education. So the landlord in Eastern UP, I said, why Dalits have, what has this economic reforms, etc., how it has impacted you, your family? He said, now today I don't control any Dalit. 7, 8 Dalits sitting at my in front of my house. I said, what has caused this? He says, Bazaarbad.
Markets. Choice.
These guys have fled Bombay and Delhi and all that, and they don't love their land, they don't love their nature, they don't love their fresh air. For the sake of money, they have gone to Bombay, Delhi. The other Dalit landlord, I think he's a landlord's uncle. He's still a friend of mine in Sitapur district. He said, पूंजीवाद ने बर्बाद कर दिया हम लोगों को. पूंजीवाद has destroyed us. Capitalism has destroyed us. Now people are fond of money than anything else. So therefore and then another one says, reasons for Thakur's destruction is this road. I said, how come? Because they took this road to reach Lucknow, and then this bloody train that in English men introduced, and they fled to Ghaziabad and Delhi and here and there. So, in the caste Hindu society, modernity is the biggest pillar. And as far as I can see, modernity is very close to capitalism. Right?
Why are Ambedkarites then so anti-capitalist? Is it a misreading or is it something else? Is it the fact that they are anti-establishment and capitalism is part of that establishment that they are revolting against, or hierarchy? Because an overwhelming number of Ambedkarites are communists, or at least, explicitly anti-capitalist. You are a very small minority.
This Ambedkar's 17th volume came few years back. So just you become an Ambedkarite because you are a Dalit. And as a character, Super Ambedkarite in my book tells, let your readers know that in my book, What is Ambedkarism? A Super Ambedkarite in Delhi has all the volumes of Ambedkar writings, all languages in his house, and he has locked them, saying that if by human touch this Ambedkar's book will become impure, and only those who want to question Ambedkar read Ambedkar. And in Maharashtra, the Dalits become Ambedkarite in their mother's wombs. Because you are a Dalit, you say you are Ambedkarite. A very eminent Dalit asked me, Prasad, the kind of India Ambedkar wanted was state socialism. I said the memorandum he submitted to the Constituent Assembly when he was not sure that he would enter. I said, okay, I agree. But because it's written there. Will you agree my point? I said, what? I said, it is written there. The name of India will be United States of India. Ambedkar. Where is that? I said, open, go and at home and open. Ambedkar was so inspired by America that he wanted India to be named as United States of India. During Cold War, when the world was divided into two and America was an evil, he wanted an alliance with America. He quotes Jefferson more than any Indian scholar. He quotes experiences of blacks in the US. Dalits who got into the realm of intellectual, journey, because left communism talks of equality, revolution, all that. So Dalits fell in love with communist thinkers and scholars in universities and college campuses.
I think there is also some fault of free market places like, say, the Swatantra Party, right? Or say Rajaji and Meenu Masani and Pilu Modi. So we did have a free market capitalism movement in India, but they never talked about caste. I think that is also a responsibility of caste Hindus and others. Maybe they believed they were post-caste and they didn't need to discuss it. Rajaji, of course, has a particularly poor record on caste, though he's a great free market advocate. So I think some of the blame also lies on the other side, not just those who are Dalits reading Ambedkar, but also those who are talking about capitalism and never make a mention about how it will benefit Dalits and how it will annihilate caste.
Yes, you are absolutely right. But the Swatantra guys were not totally bad guys. They talk of...
No, they were great, but they never made a mention of caste.
They talk of scheduled caste in their manifesto. So, but because where they were found in a company that had no credibility. Even now, in certain villages, certain elderly Dalits describe their landlords as bloody Pujipati. They describe their landlords as bloody capitalists because capitalism is explained as a system of exploitation, not as an economic order. So Indian communists had a very, very safe way of not attacking feudalism, but attacking capitalism in their
Capitalism instead.
street. I come from political constituency that was dominated by communists for long. Before that, also communists would be elected as member of parliament. So we used to hear speeches and all that. Tata's income grew by this much, and Birla income grew by 100 times, and all that. No mention of landlords. In people's consciousness, capitalism was taken as a system of exploitation, not as an economic order. So Dalit intellectuals read Marxism first and Ambedkarism later, and the books of Ambedkar that I am talking came few years back.
Yeah, they came so late that they never knew that Ambedkar rejected Marxism, that he rejected some of these communism and Marxism and these ideologies.
He gives a scheme of book in his manifesto.
Yes, which never got published.
Never got published, but he writes a scheme. So Dalits became Marxist. No, by reading Marx. They became Ambedkarite before their birth. Because they are Dalit, they are bound to be Ambedkarite. So truth got lost.
So you have been a very strong proponent of three specific things. So the first is you hold the view that liberalization has done a lot for Dalits. It has lifted large number of Dalits, out of poverty, and it has given them opportunity. And I think it's not just Dalits. Liberalization lifted 270 million Indians out of poverty. So it has also been good for India, the way, Ambedkar would think about this. The second is you have talked about how Dalits are entrepreneurial. They have shed their, assigned occupation at birth, which is the biggest, sin of the caste system in one sense. And they have taken on, like you just mentioned in the case of hospitals, right? They have showed entrepreneurship in areas where there has been no historical connection. They have completely come on their own, right? These are rags to riches stories. And that we need more of these rags to riches stories. And then the third part of the story that you've talked about is, as more and more Dalits lift out of poverty and create a middle class, you are going to create a massive group of people with a very large amount of purchasing power, such that if they espouse Dalit businesses, then there is going to be this greater investment, even more opportunity for Dalits and so on and so forth. Now, the way you have thought about this problem is completely from a free market point of view, right? Dalits can compete in the market. Dalits can raise capital in the market. And all that we need anyone to do is not charity and not politics, but just put their money where their mouth is and buy products made by Dalit. Now we are in a new phase where suddenly, people are making a reverse turn from liberalization and globalization. There's all this talk about, again, import restrictions and Atmanirbhar economy and moving away from markets and so on and so forth. How do you see this project of yours going forward, say in the next decade or two, when it comes to Dalit entrepreneurship and Dalit middle class emerging from the market process?
Let me put a few points. One is about capitalism. As I have written in the book, capitalism widens gap. Capitalism creates more inequality. I have also written in next line is, but capitalism creates freedom to the underclass. In my own childhood, I never thought that there will be a day when bullocks will be completely disappeared from North India. When Dalits sitting for 8 hours at landlord's house will leave that place completely empty. No human sign would be seen during noon. This is the freedom capitalism brings, because when a Dalit wants to escape his landlords, there are only two ways: a government job or a factory job. Government job is to those who are educated. Factory job is to those who are school dropouts. So capitalism creates inequality, but leads to freedom of the underclass. I asked my Dalit critics, do you want freedom first or equality? And I have many dumb people around. So I have to say, ask blacks of the US during slavery, before Emancipation Declaration, what would have been the slogan of blacks? Equality or freedom? Dalits don't have freedom to dress well, don't have freedom to ride horses. This inequality, India's two brothers are unequal, Anil Bhai Ambani and Mukesh Ambani. There are many Indians. I used to make fun of some in my visit to the US, that why your daughter in an Ivy League and other is in Janta University. Both are unequal. Why is your one son taller than your other son? Unequal. So this debate of equality and inequality has taken that kind of stupid form. You read all Ambedkar's books and tell me how much he talks about inequality and poverty. Take any Dalit leader or scholar who has asked for poverty elimination. They have asked for dignity. They have asked for freedom. Those who have no experience of being unfree do not talk about freedom, but talk of equality. These things have to be kept in mind while speaking about capitalism. What capitalism does. Capitalism does this. And Ambedkar knew that in a modern society, completely industrialized society, certain things will come to Dalits without demanding. Number two, globalization. I have at least 100 evidence, though it will take some time to bring that in book form, how economic reforms help Dalits. I know 100 Dalits who were working in big companies, big factories, working with Tata Motors, working with this company, that company. With the start of economic reforms, outsourcing entered India also. Many workers were asked to choose from retirement or a package, and you take the package and go and do whatever you have that money, or starts making these parts for the company. So in Faridabad and Ghaziabad, most Dalits who are auto part makers were earlier workers with some auto company. This did not come from any direction from the government of India. It is a natural. Economic reforms did not come unclothed. It had height, it carried a computer, it had boot, it had leather coat, so many things. Many Indians became first-time entrepreneurs. Some fell in Dalit hands as well. The kind of Inspector Raj that was before was somehow not completely scrapped, but business was made easier. Dalits benefited more than the existing players because Dalits had hardly any person in Department of Industry and here and there. So it benefited Dalits. Third, economic reforms caused democratization of manufacturing. So a Dalit in Ghaziabad makes a bike stand for a famous two-wheeler company. Before, everything was manufactured inside. I have studied Tata Motors at Pune. Barring tire, everything was manufactured in the Pune complex. Economic reforms made things more competitive. So give this job to some worker who will manufacture in his home. In fact, I had written a column also on Force Marshal. There is a company in Pune. They gave to many workers. I studied a Dalit worker. They said, take this machine in your home, make this bolt, supply to us. So it democratized manufacturing.
India has always, even post liberalization, it has had an aversion for large scale manufacturing. And the kinds of processes and outcomes you are talking about are an outcome of division of labor and large scale manufacturing, where, now it is suddenly valuable to outsource the making of a bolt or to, outsource the making of a cycle stand for a big cycle company. If everything remains small scale because we romanticize this small and medium enterprises so much as government policy, do you feel like these opportunities will be limited, that they could have been much more, that we could have benefited much more?
Mahindra Motors earlier did what? They assembled the jeeps that were left by the Britishers. Hero Cycles did what? They were assembling and making punctures and all those things. Today they are big players. In case of Dalits, they cannot immediately become Ford Motors and Tata Motors. And they will have to start from very small. And as I said, the research we have done for the University of Pennsylvania, 98% Dalit manufacturers. Dalits are more in manufacturing than trading. Dalits are first timers. That happened after economic reforms. So there is a boom of manufacturers and manufacturing in India after economic reforms. Some benefit landed in Dalit hands as well. And that is what Ambedkarism is all about. That if there are so many mangoes all over and so many apples all over, then some will fall in Dalit hands as well.
As you point out, Dalits have created this middle class. Dalits have created purchasing power. They've started from small scale manufacturing, and if government policies are sensible and if we continue down the path of liberalization and globalization, they will also achieve scale. But I want to move on to a couple of other questions related to this question of capitalism on one hand and reservation on the other. So I'll start with reservation. There is excellent empirical evidence that, reservations have done a lot for the upward mobility of Dalits. But on the other hand, the way our reservation policy is designed, my sense is instead of annihilating caste, we have actually constitutionalized caste. Right? Instead of a process of reservations over 7 decades making people lose their caste identity, we have created a system where people only get benefits by linking more strongly to their caste identity. And now we have, more and more groups far removed from oppressed Dalits or historically oppressed Dalits who are clamoring for these benefits. One moment was, of course, in the mid-90s with the Mandal Commission and OBCs becoming a part of the reservation or the protected class, right? And this is kind of an awkward moment in Indian history because we do have a lot of evidence that Shudras, who are at the end of the day caste Hindus, they are lower caste Hindus, also participated in the oppression of Dalits, and now they are in the same protected class as Dalits. And now more recently with the 103rd Amendment, you see an even bigger shift, right? Even upper castes, as long as they show some socioeconomic backwardness, as long as they hold very little land and have low income, are now in the same protected category as Dalits. And now we have people, clamoring for caste certificates and making sure they strengthen their caste identities. The moment their children are born, they make sure they have their caste certificate and so on and so forth. So in some sense, I feel like though reservations have done a lot of good, we have drifted very far from Dr. Ambedkar's vision of annihilating caste. We have actually politicized and constitutionalized and strengthened caste.
There is a section of Indians, basically upper caste Indians, called caste Hindus. Your audience should also know what is caste Hindus. Why Ambedkar was writing caste Hindus. So my explanation is those who prefer caste over their religion. And then I go and say that and prefer religion over nation. So I find a good number of people in the audience saying, Mr. Prasad, why to give reservation to the second, third generation Dalits? We interact with them. We have dinners with them. There are intercaste marriages taking place. So my counter question is that caste Hindu society, if at all it likes some Dalits, they are the same Dalits that are produced by reservations. If I am in a caste, upper caste dominated apartment, people come to my place and have food or drink. I go to their place, but sweeper doesn't get the same privilege. So the Dalits who have been created by reservations, society has some liking for them. So in the beginning, it would appear that it has made caste more regimented. At the end, if Dalit middle class expands, now I'll be surprising you even more. We are publishing, the book is ready, publishing a coffee table book of 101 Dalit-owned hospitals in North India. And there is a hospital by first generation doctor in Haldwani that is 200 bedded. There is a hospital in Hapur near Delhi. A Dalit doctor, first generation doctor, has created a 100-bed hospital. And Hapur is a new district, so the district manual says if collector falls sick, he will go to this hospital. That is private. As India is a society in transition, so everything is seen in isolation. People ask me, Mr. Prasad, if Dalit still remains so backward even after 70 years, what has reservation done? Reservation has created a Dalit middle class, and members of Dalit middle class are not now making certificates for their sons and daughters and asking them to compete. This year, a Dalit boy, son of a degree college lecturer in Bulandshahr, he got 100 out of 100 in all the 5 subjects in intermediate. So the journey has just begun, and whenever we discuss caste, it ultimately falls on reservation. Now, OBC started demanding reservation, so they would not ask for merit. They would not ask for the doctor who will be produced by these medical colleges. Now, upper caste have got reservation, and this year's UPSC score, 85% scheduled caste candidates selected by UPSC are in the upper caste that category, that cut-off point. So this transition is taking place. Had there not been reservation, I would have not got admission in JNE.
I am actually saying the opposite. I am saying it makes Dalit candidates more competitive because there is this huge opportunity to rise to the middle class. I am saying the opposite. I am saying it makes other candidates, non-Dalit candidates, less competitive. Because instead of using their privilege and competing in the marketplace, they are now clamoring for reservations and using political benefits because this kind of policy exists, and all they need to do is they need to attach themselves to it. So I think the problem is actually the reverse.
I'm not dismissing, I'm understanding, but I'm saying this is what these are the questions I face. A few days back, I was speaking to students at IIM Ahmedabad. So they all started asking second generation Dalit, third generation Dalit, what will happen to me? I said, have you heard that when Britishers came to India, when Macaulay's system of education was introduced in India in 1884, there were only 2 divisions in India, first class, second class. Second class, 45% minimum, first class, 60% minimum. If a college came in Madras, but there were not enough students. Professors were imported from Britain. So the upper caste at that time, basically Brahmins, approached the Governor General saying that this is a new system of education. Our children are not able to qualify +2, at that time called intermediate. So please create a third class. and bring down the pass percentage. I said, have you heard, have your parents, grandparents, any relative, any friend in your community said this to you? No, we have not heard it. I said, have you heard that Indians started demanding Indianization of civil service during British? And they said, remove French as a necessary compulsory subject. So have you heard it? That Indians saying that there should be Indians in the civil service. They understand India better than you. You are foreigner. You are so please allow us to represent in the civil service. Allow us space in judiciary. So the battle you have, the experience you have undergone for 100 years. In case of Dalits, it is just 70 years, not even 100 years. You have not heard the story that when my college system of education came in 1854, British government had to issue that and had to issue a special instruction that no child will be refused admission on the ground of caste or race or gender, because there were riots all over India against Dalits entering system of education. I said, have anybody told you that this happened? No, nobody has told. So that's why I say in India, caste nation is not the first loyalty to caste Hindus. It is always caste. There are rebels. Devesh Kapoor is a rebel. Barkha Batti is a rebel. Radhika Rai is a rebel. Pratap Bhanu Mehta, Ramesh Kumar, they have betrayed their caste, their religion. We want more betrayers from caste Hindus. The way during post-emancipation lynching, that phase started in US. There were many white people who were killed by their own white people because they stood with blacks.
There is a different area of Dalit emancipation that I want to talk to you about, which is marriage endogamy, right? The one trend that has remained very stable for the last 50, 60 years, and, a number of scholars have written about this, is that despite increases in GDP per capita, despite urbanization, despite rising incomes, and despite Dalit entrepreneurship and the Dalit middle class, overwhelming number of Indians marry within caste. And in fact, according to the surveys, only 5 to 6% of Indians marry outside their caste or their jati. And, there are some really startling research on this. So, for instance, in a research in their paper by Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, Maitresh Ghatak, and La Fortune, they use an urban sample of matrimonial ads, and they show that 85%, even in urban areas, preferred marrying within their caste, and that a bride's family would actually trade off the difference between no education and a master's degree to avoid marrying outside caste. Now, my feeling is that marriage endogamy is the most persistent institution. It is the biggest barrier in annihilation of caste, and it is also the most difficult institution to reform, because it's very difficult to give incentives when it comes to marriage. It is very difficult for the state to intervene. It is such a private institution. So, how does one break marriage endogamy? Through the market process, not government interventions. Even increase in free markets, even increase in rising incomes have not managed to shatter that institution. If there is any change, it is very small steps. So what is a good way to think about, persistence of marriage endogamy?
Before I come to this very all-important question, let me say, Dalit entrepreneurs, Dalit hospital owners, we have brought out an issue of Dalits, one issue of Dalit Enterprise magazine, creating a first-time entrepreneurs, creating hotels and restaurants in Agra. But what happens after a point of time, neither state asks Dalits, what do you want, nor the society, not the private sector. So that's why Dalits stop becoming big. So that's where state and society needs to come. Insofar as about marriage, Indian caste system has rested on twin principles of blood purity and occupation theory. In my childhood, if you give an upper caste woman $100 a day, when I say my childhood, I am saying Sirsa 1970. Ask an upper caste Hindu lady that you will get $100 a day. This Dalit man needs a maid. Will you work there? No, no question. Today, I think you should undertake a project, and that will be very interesting. If you drive from Delhi till Ajamgarh or Lucknow or Gorakhpur, on roadsides, small markets, you will find beauty parlors. Most beauty parlors are owned by caste Hindu women. Be it a Dalit, be it a upper caste, all brides do get their makeups done in these beauty parlors. I never thought that in my lifetime an upper caste woman will be giving face massage to a Dalit woman. Because capitalism has made money more important than your mouth stitch. So this is one point. As my life experience goes, most intercaste marriages that are taking place are in IT sector that has good number of women workers as well. It is slow because men and women are not in the same proportion at workplaces in modern cities. And as you said, an illiterate man but of his own caste would be preferred than a doctor from forget Dalit, from other caste within upper caste.
Yeah, within upper caste also. It's just endogamy is so limited within a jati.
So that is why people say, even Ambedkar said close to that, India is a sick society. Only big machines, big markets can dismantle this, not law, rule, moral values. Only complete annihilation of old system will pave the way for annihilation of caste. And in our own life, if we get to live 20 more years, caste will become old Purana Kila in Delhi. Where you are a Thakur, you are a Brahmin, but nobody bothers because you have a very small pocket. So Purana old Kila is there in Delhi, but nobody even looks. Only scholars come and study and do something like that.
So your view is we need to start with occupation, where you break the link between caste occupation and the actual occupation, which happens through the market opportunities. Second, increasing in purchasing power, right? Increase in incomes of the Dalit class, of an emergent middle class. And third, urbanization, where they meet people of other castes, either in university or in jobs and so on. And that is the only way one day we can break marriage endogamy. There is no silver bullet to solve this problem. There's no other policies we can pursue or any other, I don't mean government policies. I also mean social reform. Is there a movement that one needs to think about marriage endogamy? Because we are, living in 3 centuries at the same time, right? On one extreme, you have these great Dalit entrepreneurs. Their children are going to good universities in cities. They meet their partner who's from another caste and they get married. On the other extreme, we have Dalits even marrying someone from their own caste. If they mount a horse, they are killed and they are lynched. And then you actually actively have intercaste couples where, if a caste Hindu a child, son or daughter, marries a Dalit, then both the families are out for blood, and it's typically the caste Hindus who do the honor killings even of their own daughter, right? So we live in all these centuries simultaneously. And what is the way to bring this out or up to speed or solve this problem?
In the 90s, when economic reforms began, many Dalits and many progressive upper caste thought economic reforms is a gas cylinder. They said it is LPG. So I was the one to break from the gas cylinder kind of description of economic reforms. So I was asked, and people know. So I was asked by a very famous news channel anchor in Hindi, tell us, Prasad, this has happened only yesterday. An honor killing has happened. A Dalit who married an upper caste woman has been killed. I said, it is happening every month. He said, yes. But now tell me, what about your economic reforms and all that? I said, wish these killings started 100 years back. This is happening because there is intercaste marriage taking place. If in one village, a non-Dalit girl has eloped with a Dalit boy and killed, Dalit boy is killed by her parents. From the same village, if another Dalit, upper caste woman marries a Dalit boy, maybe 10 also thought of marrying a Dalit boy but did not marry because of the threat of the life. So I said, that means India is changing. In my childhood, there was no bloody honor killing at all. Yes, there was hardly any Dalit shot dead. Entire Dalit hamlet was taken by one lathi by upper caste people. Now they need rifles to tackle Dalits.
So you see the honor killings also as part of this long-term revolution of emancipation
That is
of Dalits.
evidence. As a researcher, to me, it is an evidence that India is changing.
But how do we stop it? Because I know it is evidence that India is changing, but it's also incredibly tragic that we do this today.
That is there. It is tragic, but one has to cross this bridge. Some people will sacrifice their lives, but I think out of one intercaste marriages or 1,000, there is only one killing that takes place.
Now, on this law and order issue, I had two questions for you. One is, do you think we need greater Dalit representation in a law and order, which is, police and judiciary? Because that is one area where it seems that there is still the greatest amount of Dalit oppression. Because it is often, Dalits are not even able to report crimes. It's more true in rural areas, especially in the Hindi belt. Do you think the problem is there aren't enough Dalit representatives in the forces, which is, law and order and judiciary? Or do you think this is also part of the change and we will pass this bridge also?
It is slightly different, and I keep telling the changes that have taken place during past 7 decades after Constitution came into being after Britishers left. Dalits are now accepted as colleagues, but not as bosses. So Dalits are given insignificant postings in the departments. That is one of the reasons why Dalit officers can't do much. So we have to cross this bridge where Dalits are accepted as bosses as well. As I keep saying, my latest Times of India interview, you can search it for that. Dalits riding donkeys are cheered by caste Hindus. Dalits riding horses are feared by caste Hindus. So this distinction between a donkey and a horse, India, it is the caste society that has to solve this contradiction. Bal is in their court. That if a Dalit is able to buy a big bike or a big car or a horse, society should develop that habit of clapping that, oh my God, a Dalit who have been oppressed by our ancestors so much has finally now grown up so much that he has a Mercedes, he has a BMW, he has a bullet car equivalent to your American car, big car.
And of course, I agree with you that we need to move to a place where society can cheer Dalit achievements. But the first step is we at least need to punish people who participate in Dalit atrocities. And right now, what is happening in a lot of the, especially the Hindi belt, is they just perpetrate these crimes with complete impunity, because there is, the police is never going to actually charge upper caste with these crimes. They rape Dalit women with impunity. They kill, Dalit grooms marrying outside caste, or right. So I think there is a law and order element to this. The fear of punishment doesn't exist because there is no law and order stake when it comes to these kinds of crimes.
Partially true, but it is not a law and order problem. We have a shortage of caste Hindu martyrs. We have shortage of that. No caste, upper caste man comes and stands between the Dalit and his caste oppressor that kill me first.
So we need an Indian civil rights movement like that, the way there was in the 60s and 70s in the US.
Because caste is not a legal problem. It is a social problem. And it needs interventions from society more than from state.
Absolutely. So, on the last question, I wanted to go back in history. So one of the first and one of the most important aspects of Ambedkar's thought, political and scholarly, was the need for separate electorates. And we all know that, he presented this at the round table. How do you think things would have been different had there been separate electorates? Because right now we see a lot of clamoring for political power and political identity, not just amongst Dalits, but all castes. Do you think the problem of separate electorates would have solved that problem, and instead we would have focused on Dalit education, Dalit economic opportunity, and so on and so forth? Or do you think it would have been a completely different political equilibrium of some other sort?
So it is like this. I am an atheist. But a Dalit goddess, that is, Dalit goddess English was born in my house. And that has become very popular. I was making a temple for Dalit goddess English. It couldn't move beyond a point because of some issues. So I am asked by my close friends that you are an atheist and a goddess was born, a symbol of faith was born in your house. So I said that to put a new idea, you have to go to extreme, some extreme. Moderation will follow later. So I am saying Dalit women should worship Dalit goddess because Dalit women don't have goddesses. And my Dalit goddess is well dressed than all goddesses put together. And she is a PhD from Harvard, and she has a constitution, and she stands on a computer pedestal, and she has that Statue of Liberty type dress. So she is superior goddess. I don't say that teach your kids English, because I have in this my consciousness that if they start worshipping English as a goddess, nobody can prevent them from giving their kids ABCD. So had there been separate electorate, there would have been some consequences, and then society would come and say, let us moderate it. Something like that would have happened, and I have written enough about political power clamor for the list. I have said it is no less than marijuana. And more so among the list. And then I have said there are 10 pillars of power that will make your political power, even if you are able to grab it. And those 10 pillars of power in any society, one of the pillars is wine opener. The day there is a Dalit middle class that has wine openers also in their kitchen, that situation would witness a confident Dalit middle class that can use its cultural power. So unless you have that kind of culturally empowered class, that Obama visits Delhi and says, I want to have a dinner or cocktail in a Dalit home.
So a global cosmopolitanism. You want Dalits to be like Ambedkar, dress like Ambedkar, to be able to have a meal with any president anywhere in the world, and so on and so forth. And be confident.
That's why I said that a Dalit politician entering parliament is like a gun without bullets. is like a book without pages, is like a river without water.
So the revolution needs to come from somewhere else, not the political. So, this on this question of, the wine opener as a proxy, and you talked about the English goddess. I want to come to the last question on this emerging from your book also, and something that was incredibly important for Ambedkar. One of the reasons Ambedkar became the scholar of his caliber was because he could leave India. I don't think he would have reached his full potential in India given all the problems of caste, right? And you've also talked about, scholarships for Dalit students at university abroad. Ambedkar talked about this, how we must create scholarships for Dalit students abroad. And my feeling is, in one sense, we have focused all our energy on reservations, which are Indian institutions, and we have not focused enough on giving opportunity beyond limited Indian institutions to Dalits. Because, as long as they go to Indian institutions, you're going to have situations like the tragic death of Rohit. You go to a situation where you manage to get admission, you're pursuing your PhD, but you're still steeped in an environment which considers you inferior and they won't let you grow. So in one sense, I feel like, scholarships for Dalit abroad is an incredibly important program that just never took off from the ground. And one of the barriers for scholarships for Dalit students abroad is that we don't have excellent primary and secondary educations for Dalit students. So I think it needs to start even sooner. We need something like school choice vouchers or something like that for Dalit students, where we empower the student and the family directly and they can take their voucher to any school they want. And, if the school refuses them, they also lose the money. So I feel like we haven't paid enough attention to the entire pipeline of Dalit education, from primary school until scholarships to go to Columbia University the way Ambedkar received. How do you think we solve this problem of the Dalit education pipeline?
I agree completely with you. First, it is both ways. You go through the parliamentary debates, you hardly find Dalit MPs asking for these reforms. And I go even a step further. Dalits need not just education, they need accent. Accent can hide their caste. It can be like a bulletproof jacket. Dalits have to realize that if one Ambedkar, after being trained by Columbia University and London School of Economics, could do so much. All the 10 presidents of Congress party in India were trained in Britain. So why not send our kids to the universities abroad? This is Dalit middle class has to think. On the other hand, the people in government, if I become friendly to a prime minister and ask, we want 10 crore more ration cards, government will have no hesitation in saying, yes, take it. If I say I want 1,000 scholarships for Dalit kids and Adivasi kids to study abroad, oh, Mr. Prasad, this is very problematic. There is only one post of Prime Minister of India. Because there is only one post, Dalit should not become, not every Dalit can become Prime Minister, so no Dalit should become Prime Minister. Or there is only one head Vice Chancellor, if there are only 20 Vice Chancellors in India, say of central universities. Because there are only 20 positions, so therefore Dalit should not aspire that. So if not all Dalits can become capitalists, so therefore Dalit should not pursue this agenda.
And one point which is missed here is that unlike the post of Prime Minister, which is fixed, there can be only one Prime Minister, capitalism doesn't work like that, right? The size of the market increases, right? And then there is greater division of labor and specialization and so on. So the more Dalit capitalists there are, and the larger and more prosperous India becomes, the more Dalit capitalists can emerge. So it is a little bit different from the Prime Minister example in that there is still a lot of room for growth there.
I am answering that argument where they say, only few Dalits can become capitalists. And for your information, I'm writing my book on Dalit capitalism. My Dalit capitalism is more a self-respect movement than just a money accumulation tool. Because Dalits were not allowed to own wealth, accumulate wealth, there is every reason that Dalits become wealthier and wealthier.
Can you tell us about your intellectual journey?
I was born in a village in Azamgarh district, eastern Uttar Pradesh, backward conservative area. Just because my father and two of his brothers, basically his first two brothers, went to Burma in 1932 and made good fortune, built big house, but they had to come back during Second World War when Royal Japanese Army had invaded Burma. So we had that past. My elder brother became a sub-inspector in 69. So I didn't have much problem of fund. I did my BA from my village college, and I had a subject English literature, but I studied English literature in Hindi medium. Even my professor could not speak English. So, somebody told me, but because my brother, he was a police officer, then I used to wear suit while going to college. He became station in charge, and I became college president in 77 after Janata Party ruled. So he sent back his bullet bike to me. So I was noticed. So somebody said, there is a relative of my political science professor. He said, as if you are coming from JNU, as if you are roaming around in the corridors of JNU. I said, what is JNU? He said, Jawaharlal Nehru University, where every student has to be in three-piece suit, even in June in dining hall. They'll be refused food if they don't go. Then JNU came into my nervous system. So I came to JNU, and then I was fascinated by the ideology of Marxism, communism, and all that, and American evil and things like that. So I fell in that group, and I joined the Naxal Party. Meanwhile, there was a big movement in JNU in 1983. We were expelled, rusticated from university for 3 years. 140 students or so, and then most of them apologized to the Prithviraj Commission that university was closed. Sine die. I went to Tihar jail. Then became a Naxal for 3 years. Carried a revolver with 6 loaded bullets. But I always argued with my comrades that killing class enemy is no answer. So there was an occasion where we were passing through Basti district of North India, Uttar Pradesh, and then there was a family eating ice cream. So there were 3 comrades. We all had revolvers, 6 round revolvers loaded. So let us kill all 3. I said, why? Daddy, our people are not getting food to eat, and these families eating ice cream. I said, no. I want everybody to eat ice cream. I also like ice cream. So I was shocked, and then I said, Daddy, this is not the way. So for 6 months, I roamed around here and there, what to do, what not to do. My brother said, go and take admission in Lucknow, in somewhere. I said, unless university clears, I won't get admission anywhere. Then suddenly I got a notice from JNU that your rustication period is over. If you want to come back to JNU, you are most welcome. I was very happy, and along with a friend, I came back to JNU, and then I went to the registrar office, and then they said, you have to say sorry. Then I went to, I met my professor G.P. Deshpande, and then said, sir, I have already spent 3 years outside JNU. I have lost 3 years. Why to say sorry? Then he took me to the vice chancellor, and they said, no, he's a very good boy. He got a bad company and all that. So why you want to play with his dignity? Why should he write sorry? I can write sorry on his behalf. He said, all right, go ahead, gentlemen. Then I realized that most of my relatives who have become freer from landlords are the ones who had migrated to Bombay Some of them worked with the beauty product company, very famous foreign company that makes Lux soap and all these things. Hindustan Liver, Hindustan Liver, and somebody worked in Century, somebody worked in Tata, somebody worked here, somebody worked with Godrej. My one uncle worked with Godrej. So I said, these guys are good. So I started thinking, and then it was the first golden jubilee, I suppose, of our freedom, 1997, 50 years. So there was a journalist, he was asking opinions of everybody, and then somebody joked me, Mr. Prasad, you are very fond of Britishers, you must have some criticism of Britishers. We were just taking tea at Ganga Dhaba. It just came to me. Yes, I too am a critic of British Raj. British, they came too late and left too early. Then it became a talking point, and then I had to find reasons for that. And then I said, bloody America is good. Ambedkar studied in America, and America gave food to Indians for 10 years free during that great drought, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58. I loved capitalism, but I was afraid of praising it. Because in JNU, I rejoined JNU, did my MPhil, completed my MPhil on China's technology transfer after Mao. And then I registered for PhD to study sciences in China. Because China was a very great society in ancient times. So I lost midway, lost interest. I left university even though I had 3 years of fellowship left. Because I was asking me what will I do with this expertise and Chinese science. And during my Naxal days, I had seen the life of people and things like. Then I started studying Ambedkar more, and then capitalism, and then market and all those things. But I was not very sure what I am saying, because there was nobody next to me to support me, to endorse what I'm saying, though I knew the truth. Truth is this, that Dalits who fled from landlords either were caught and entered prison or entered factory sheds. Factory shed or prison were only two institutions that hosted Dalits who fled their landlords. So why to harass them? When I got a column, then I started a movement called Dalit Shiksha Andolan, Dalit Education Movement, and I could gather 20,000 people in Lucknow. That movement failed for some reason. Then I came back to JNU. I started writing with Pioneer, and then Pioneer gave me a column. I wrote an article with Times of India also.
But you were the first Dalit columnist in a national newspaper
Yeah.
and in English who had a regular voice. It is still kind of shocking how few Dalit columnists we have in the media, or voices we have in the media. So you were the only Dalit I read through my, growing up years in the Pioneer.
And Chandra Mitra has to be given that credit. B.N. Uniyal was a great Indian journalist. There was a quarrel between Indian journalists with Kansiram. And Kansiram allegedly slapped that journalist, who is a good friend of mine, my junior. So much was written, and then an American journalist called Kenneth J. Cooper, he was bureau chief of Washington Post. He asked his junior Rama Lakshmi to see if there is any Dalit journalist. I want to quote him. Then he met, she started searching for that. No. So he met Mr. Uniyal, B.N. Uniyal, in some cocktail party, and he asked Uniyal to find out a Dalit journalist whom I can quote about this ruckus between Kansiram and media. He tried his level best to figure out. He could not. Then he wrote a column in Pioneer, in search of a Dalit journalist. Rama Lakshmi ventured out looking for some. So I have written a few articles in Pioneer those days. So she found me in JNU. So then I got a call, became a columnist. Then slowly and slowly I said to myself, what is true? I will pursue only that. It hurts anybody.
Tell us about your project By Dalit, because I am fascinated by this project. I follow you on Twitter. I see all the posts of all the great products. And I think it's a great example of Dalit capitalism and entrepreneurship, but also a great example of activism, but through the economic order. So can you just tell us a little bit about it?
As I told you, Dalit's annual income is $50 billion, but they don't have control on their economy. As you would see in American experience, their purchasing power, $1.5 billion, is seen as a tool of their struggle. Let any corporate guys come and say something bad about blacks,
and they'll take their purchasing power away.
Yeah. So Dalits have invested North India invested their entire energy into politics. In Maharashtra, they have invested into religion. In South, they have invested into activism. Dalits have not thought of Dalit economy. As a result, Dalits have not been able, with so much of wealth flowing, so much of money flowing into their pockets. It is like a flood water finally going into some kind of ocean. So I see great Dalit manufacturers in Agra, for instance, who manufacture shoes for American brands, European brands, without their name. So they are just vendors. As a result, we don't have any brand that can be said it is a Dalit brand. So if somebody is making shoes for an American company and that company is selling that shoe in the entire world, and that is a Dalit art. Likewise, Dalits in Delhi make leather coats for gents and women, only for foreign brands. They do not exist anywhere. Dalits in Delhi manufacture jeans for other brands, do not exist anywhere. Dalits don't have a bank. Dalits don't have insurance companies. So I said, let us promote Dalit brands. When I entered the field, there are no Dalit brands, though Dalits are great manufacturers. So I am campaigning among them to register your brand. He said, where will you sell? I said, I'll sell it on this website. So buydalits.com is not my family fortune. It is a campaign asking Dalits to brand their products, because that will elevate their status also in society. That, wow, this is Dalit made. Wow. And Dalits would slowly and slowly start realizing that they need to control their income. They have $50 billion into their hands, and that they don't have any control on that. So this is not doing very well, this website. Also, we have very good products, but I will keep saying, because this is truth.
I don't think this is just about Dalit purchasing power. I think all Indians should support Dalit entrepreneurship and Dalit products, right? So that is another way we can vote with our voice. Not just with our vote, we can also vote with our money, right? And this is not just a Dalit economy. This is everybody. I would buy from Buy Dalits, You said you're working on a new book which is talking about 100 different cases of hospital owners, Dalit hospital owners. So what is your writing process for those types of books?
I visit.
You visit. And these are case studies that you document.
And sometimes I prefer sleeping in their factories because I see this is the highest point of Dalit genius. So the book, for instance, I'm writing on Dalit capitalism. There are three questions that I can share with you. I'm asking elderly Dalits who can recall Dalit lives in their villages. From South India, like Professor Sanal Mohan, if somebody wants to verify, so Dalits who are very prominent today, but those who have either heard from their parents or seen themselves. Sirsa 1947. Question number one. Do you remember, have you heard, was there any Dalit in your village with large belly, tummy? Do you remember any Dalit in your village possessing a rupees 10 note? I am asking them, was there a case in your village where Dalits got up from bed after sunset? So, Dalits, was there any Dalit in your village who tasted ever cattle milk other than their mother's milk? Did any Dalit in your village, have you heard, ate ghee, got to eat ghee? Was there any Dalit in your village who ate wheat bread? Because eating wheat bread was also a prohibition. Then I'll build the case of Dalit capitalism.
So these are all proxies for not just exclusion and oppression, but they're also proxies for poverty, lack of wealth, lack of access, right? And you are showing how these proxies have disappeared, which gives evidence for how Dalits have actually moved up in society. Is that the case?
I'm finally to say that how cash is important.
Cash is important. And Dalits weren't allowed to have cash, which is why the right to private property is so important for Dalits.
Yes. And Ambedkar defended that.
I know that you don't watch much television or binge watch anything. How have you been spending your time during the COVID pandemic?
I wrote this book.
You wrote the book during the pandemic?
Second book during the pandemic. I waited for 15 days and I realized reading articles in various newspapers, global publications, then I realized that this may not end in a year or so. So what will I do? So I started writing, I finished.
So you're working on 3 books during the pandemic. That is, I can't believe you say that you are not scholarly. I think you're beating everyone in how scholarly you are. Thank you so much for your time, Chandra Bhan. It was a pleasure having this conversation.
Thanks for listening to Ideas of India. If you enjoy this podcast, please help us grow by sharing with like-minded friends. You can connect with me on Twitter at @SRajagopalan. In the next episode of Ideas of India, I speak with Soumitra Chatterjee on India's agricultural economy and policy.